All right, we'll go ahead and get started here as you start to make your way back in and find your seats. Kind of the order that we're going to walk through here is I'll explain to you, just recap what all we did in Germany on our trip, and then the kids will come up and give some testimonies. I've asked them to share two things primarily. They'll start with something that was memorable, enjoyable, fun, that sticks out to them in their mind, and then they will finish with basically giving them the guidelines that the camp gives them during the testimony time at the end of the week at camp, which is basically this week, God. And so their second part of their testimony, or their little speaking time, will be, while on this trip, how God worked in their life. We, as a youth group, last month went to Ingelheim, Germany. One of the reasons that I waited to do this testimony time so long is I did want to provide the teens the opportunity to interact with the Snells again here. And so for those of you that did not know, when the Snells came to our church to present their ministry, we actually took them out to lunch afterward. So kind of like reversed the roles. So now you're in our home and we're taking you out to lunch. And that was super enjoyable for the teens. And I think it just further enhanced what we were able to do there. I think that like every way that we've interacted with the Snells that you've heard over the course of this summer has been a great opportunity for our church to minister to them, to get to know them, and to tether our hearts to theirs. And that's been super enjoyable. And your teens have really gotten a great opportunity to do that. And so we went to Ingelheim, Germany. So where is this? This is a map of Germany here. The Rhine River is here on the left. It runs down the western border of Germany. So you see it comes down here, and then it hitches over. We were right in that little armpit of the Rhine. Don't tell the Snells I told you that we were in the armpit of the Rhine. But that's where we were. So it comes and it forks east, and then it heads back south again. We were right in there. So I have this big red arrow to show you where we were. We were where it turns to the east. And so when we took a boat tour later in the week, we took the Rhine north, and then when we went to the city of Mainz, we followed the Rhine east. So that's where we were. Here's just kind of a recap of the trip. The explanation or the rationale that we gave the teens before we left was this. Community Baptist Church partners and associates with many missionaries and ministries around the world. Through interaction with missionaries and people of various cultures, students learn to sympathize with both groups, see the need and reach of the gospel, learn the heart and scope of missions, and serve others with their giftings. This trip assists students in broadening their understanding of the world around them and pushing them toward greater selflessness. Our desire in this trip was that the co-laborers would echo the words of Paul in Philippians 1, 3-5, and 1 Thessalonians 1, 2-3, which read, "I thank my God in all remembrance of you, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making my prayer with joy, because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now." That's Philippians. In 1 Thessalonians, we give thanks to God always for all of you, constantly mentioning you in our prayers, remembering before our God and Father your work of faith and labor in love and steadfastness of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. We wanted the Snells to echo that sentiment, that they were thankful for our ministry here at Community and for our willingness to go there and help them. I think you'll hear this from the teens as well later on. It was an awesome trip. So far as an international trip goes, this is this is the creme de la creme, so to speak. This is the best, I think, possible opportunity to put teens outside of their country in a place that is really culturally very familiar to them. I don't think they really felt and dealt with a lot of culture shock because it's kind of like going to Iowa, but they don't speak your language. Instead of farming corn, they farm grapes and olives. Their humor is basically the exact same as ours, at least where we were in Germany. And so I think it was very easy for the teens to acclimate to the people there, and I think that was a huge blessing. Now, the language barrier is very difficult. So we, as Americans, have this thought that, well, everybody knows and is required to know English. That is not the case. Their English is basically about as good as your Spanish is that you learned in high school. So some of you are like, well, of course, they must be fluent then. And then the rest of you, the other like 95% of you are like, yep, I don't remember anything of Spanish, besides maybe the ability to count and say hello and ask where the bathroom is. And so that's because that's what they do. Instead of a Spanish class for them, they do English class. And it basically goes through high school. So those that don't choose to pursue that later on in life lose most of it. And so the language barrier is difficult. It's really hard to walk into a store and have to rely solely on pictures on boxes to know what you're buying. I remember coming back, and I walked into the grocery store like the day after we got back. And about halfway through Hy-Vee, I was like, wait a minute, I can read everything again. Like, I know what these things say. And you kind of forget that there are words for things. Like, we have so many words for so many different things. I found it hard even, getting back into the swing of using English vocabulary, like words that were large, because when you talk to them, you're using really basic language. And so it's like a mental task every time you talk to them to work through like, oh, I can't use that word. There's no way they know what that is. But that is probably the most difficult part for the students to deal with there. But the Snells are phenomenal hosts. They have it down to a science, what to do, where to go, how to go about things, how to explain them to the kids. I don't necessarily think that your teens have any clue how easy they had it, which is a huge blessing. That's not a bad thing at all. And so I'm super thankful for them. Before we get into these, which I'm sure you're just itching and dying, like, Sawyer, get past it. We want to see the pictures. Two of the ways that we challenged your students to grow over the course of the week. I took one of the devotional times just to remind your students that a lot of times when we go on trips like that, we think to ourselves, I'm going to grow in serving people. I'm going to grow in serving children. And that might very well be the case. But that's a kind of a low expectation, and a lot of times it's not an accurate assessment of where we actually need to grow. Because I think what your teens realize and what the leaders certainly saw is that very quickly they realized the biggest hurdle spiritually, so far as maturity goes, was going to be learning to work with people. Sure, ministry is to people, but ministry is also with people, and that can be as much of a challenge as the to people part of it. And so your teens very quickly realize, while I thought I was going to grow this way because that's like the easy answer, the low-hanging fruit, I think they learned pretty quickly, perhaps the way that I really needed to grow was in graciousness and in patience, in learning how to reconcile with the people around me, how to communicate with people around me. And so I encourage them in that direction, that a lot of times these trips challenge you to grow in ways that you didn't expect when you began. Nate also challenged them later in the week that this trip is a part of our effort to equip these students for ministry, and that their ministry should not start, stop, or end in Germany. Hopefully they go to Germany better equipped to come back here, where they're present the majority of the time, and serve the same way that they served and were involved in Germany. One of the biggest tragedies for a lot of people is that the most ministry they ever do is during youth group on a missions trip. And then after that, they just kind of disappear into the crowd. And so we heavily encourage your students to use that as a launch pad, not as a, well, this was the end goal, and now that I'm done, I can kind of take a break from ministry. And this is exactly what Pastor Sean's been encouraging us toward with 2 Corinthians 6, with being an ambassador. That while you may not be called the full-time vocational ministry or to be a full-time vocational missionary, you're called to be an ambassador, and that's a full-time job. And so we encourage your teens toward that. Okay, here we go. So we're going to walk you basically through the days of the week here. So this is Wednesday, June 5th. We departed from the church at 5:30 a.m. Our flight left at 8 from Des Moines. So 8 a.m. from Des Moines. This was basically just a travel day. So this is in the Des Moines airport, and this is in Frankfurt, Germany. And so when we arrived in Frankfurt, it was 11 p.m. our time, and it was 6 a.m. their time. And so it's a really odd experience, like flying through the night. And I'm not talking like chronologically through the night. I'm talking like geographically through the night. Like you fly through the dark side of the earth during what would to you be a normal day. And so we arrived in Frankfurt at 6 a.m., and we spent the entire day, like a full 24 hours in Earth time at least, traveling. So we arrived in Frankfurt, no problems at all traveling there. Germany is super safe, and it was super easy to get there. So it was no problems on the way there. This is Thursday. So you bleed Wednesday and Thursday together, because Thursday was like stay awake day. Because the best way to get rid of jet lag is to not go to sleep until you're supposed to. And so what was 11 p.m. our time, we were going to stay awake for another like 16 hours, which the teens were really excited about for about an hour. And the Snells told the teens, like, this is going to be the worst day. And a lot of times you tell people that, they're like, oh, okay, man, how bad could it be? It was bad. It was really painful. But the Snells packed that day full of, like, getting you acquainted with the town. The Snells, they live in a town called Ockenheim. Ingelheim is where the church is located. So we spent a lot of time traveling between those two places. So this is Ingelheim. We just walked. You can walk through their entire town, and it's not very far. So we toured their town. They're in the Rhine Valley. In that valley, they grow tons of grapes, and so there's vineyards like everywhere. As many cornfields as there are in Iowa, there were vineyards there. So we toured their town. This is one of like 6 or 7 Catholic churches that we went inside, and Luke did a great job of explaining just basically what Catholics in Europe believe. And what European Catholics believe is very different than the culture and the thought of American Catholics. American Catholicism, especially in the present, tends to be really intellectual, really apologetic, not in the like I'm sorry sense, but in the same way that we would have an emphasis on apologetics as it regards defending our faith. European Catholicism is not nearly as much that way, and Luke did a great job of explaining that to your kids as well. So that's the church that's actually in Ingelheim. It's unique. If you've ever studied medieval history, you will know that like the steeple, right, was supposed to be the highest point in the town because no man should be above God, and the church should always be visible and found. And so you look at the towns, you look across the river, and every place that there's a village, there's also a church distinguished by the steeple that towers above all other buildings, which is not anywhere near the case here in industrialized 200-year-old America. This is them breaking the rules, or attempting to break the rules of the first day, the no sleeping rule. About 4 p.m., people started getting real grumpy because it's hard. So that evening we went up to a convent on the top of the valley with a vineyard that was run by nuns, and we toured that and walked around there, and then finally got to go to bed on Thursday night. And I think most of them would tell you it's probably the best sleep they've ever gotten. There's just kind of look out from the top of the one side of the valley across the land. This is then Friday, June 7th. We did 4 days of canvassing. This is our first canvas day. We canvassed in the morning and the afternoon, and this is basically what our life looked like for those 3 days, for the most of the day. So you'd walk down these streets. On most of these doors, they'd be a little slot for mail. In Germany, you can put mail into directly into the mailbox, so long as it doesn't have a sticker on it that says Bitte keine Werbung, which means in English, please no advertisements. And so if it has that, you're not supposed to put it in there. They can actually file legal action. They don't, but they can. And so we canvassed all of Ingelheim in a couple of days, and we walked a lot of miles. And so that's basically what our life looked like for a few days here. This is Sunday then. Skipping to Sunday, because Saturday we just did a farmer's market, canvassed some more, and prep for church on Sunday. Sunday, we went out to eat after church. We don't have a lot of pictures of church because we were ministering a lot. During church on Sunday morning, we did music. We ministered through Testimonies. and then I preached that first Sunday, which was incredibly difficult to preach through a translator. And then we went to lunch that day in Ockenheim. So here's some pictures and photos of that. After lunch, we went and we prepped for what they call Legotagen. So obviously VBS is an English acronym, so it doesn't really work in Germany. Legotagen, Tagen is the plural form of Tag, so Guten Tag, good day. So Lego Days is what it translates to. We spent all of Sunday afternoon putting together these panels, these tables, and then sorting every one of these buckets you see on the side. They come in bags, pre-sorted, but we have to make sure they get into the exact correct bin or bucket or whatever it was that we were using to sort them. So we spent like 2 hours on Sunday afternoon putting all of these things into their correct locations by color and by piece type. That was not nearly as maddening as doing it at the end, after the kids had thrown Lego pieces all over the place and built their creations. But that's what we did Sunday afternoon. Monday then, this is another picture of doing that. Their church family was awesome. It would have been horrible for us to do this by ourselves, but their church family helped a lot. It very involved in that. Yep. All the chaos that you see here is you multiply it by like 8, because that's like a corner of the room. We spent a lot of time. There was a park not too far away from the house, a lot of time out at the park playing soccer for the most part. So your kids that don't play soccer got way better at soccer. So this is then Monday. It was our last day of canvassing. We went and canvassed one last time before the event. We prepared for the event, and then we actually began the Lego Week. The way that we ran Lego Week, we had a craft time. There was a kind of a song time, a lesson time, everything you'd basically expect. 2 build times that were 40 minutes long for the kids to play with the Legos. The distinction here in coloration, since we can't speak a lick of German, the yellow is to distinguish they don't know German, and they can't really speak to you. The orange was to tell you, these people know your language, and they would be happy to speak to you. And so I think it's very different from what you generally expect. You expect like, oh, did you share the gospel with German children? Impossible. Like, not an option. Because you wouldn't know what they're asking. You wouldn't know how to answer. It's just not a possibility. And but we were heavily involved in all the other aspects of it. And, I mean, like Lego is like the universal language in my mind. And so you don't need to speak anything to be able to get along and play with them and enjoy that time with them. And so this is most of the crew that helped us over the course of the week. Lego Man was a big hit. All of the boys had the opportunity to put on the Lego Man suit. The kids loved him. And so he would do various things throughout the week, break certain rules, and get in trouble. And so this was like every evening then for the course of the normal weekdays. That's Tuesday. We went to, it's called Borg Eltz, which means Castle Eltz, which is a castle nestled away in the mountains. That was pretty cool. It's basically everything that like you stereotypically see of Germany, all encapsulated into this one castle here. So we did that the morning of Tuesday. That evening we did Legotagen again. Continue to do that. I'm pretty sure I've already used that photo, but just act like you haven't seen it. That Wednesday then, we went to the city of Worms, or you probably pronounce it Worms. Any of you who are not really deep in history have no clue the significance of that town. But one of the reasons that Worms is best known is that is where Luther stood trial before the king of Germany. And so Luther had to stand trial before a religious council and a state council. The second one was the state council. And so we went to the place that he stood trial. What's difficult about any of these historical sites, too, this is the kind of stuff that makes Butch Fisher cry, is that all of them have been bombed and don't exist anymore. And so, like, all the places you go and visit, for the most part, have either been rebuilt or, like, it's not the same building at all. And so that makes history teachers sad. But this is the largest memorial to the Reformation in all of Europe. held in worms. So it houses a lot of figures that you theologians would know surrounding Luther there. So we did the Luther tour that morning. That evening, back to Lego Week again. I don't know what these gang signs are, so that's on your kids. More Lego Week. Thursday, we went to a town called Rudesheim. It's across the Rhine. We took a ferry to get there, and then we took a lift system up to the top of the valley to see this monument, which is called the Guardian of the Rhine. It's enormous, as depicted by your children in relation to it. But that was a really cool opportunity. It's a tourist town as well, and so they just got to roam free and see all the shops and all the different things there as well. More Lego Week at the end of that day, Thursday. And then the next day, or that evening, and many of the other evenings, we had them discuss. We did devotional thought. This evening, we forced them to talk to each other. It's Thursday. It's late in the week. They're starting to get a little bit irritated. And so we gave them some preset questions of increasing depth to change up their groups and talk about the week and discuss the ways that they're growing and being challenged. We did that on Thursday night. Friday, our last day of Lego Week, we went to the city of Mainz, or Mainz. This is where Gutenberg lived, Gutenberg that created the printing press. We started out in the Gutenberg Museum. Got to see some of the original Gutenberg Bibles. And then there's a farmer's market there as well. They got to explore that city. That's the biggest, most city place that we visited. And then that night was the last Lego Week. And so it was slightly different because we invited the parents to come see the things that their kids had been building. And so after doing the normal activities with the kids, we covered up the entire Lego city that the kids had built with a blanket, as depicted here. And then once the parents came in, we revealed it. The parents were shown their children's inventions and things that they had made, as depicted here. So it's crazy what kids can accomplish with Legos in 40 minutes of time every day, or 80 minutes of time every day. So the parents got to come in, and then they invited them to an ice cream social, is basically what it was. Or I guess it'd be cake social, afterward. And so the German speakers got a lot of great contact points with the parents of the kids who'd come to the week. And then we started teardown, given the fact that we can't really talk to many of the parents. There were some that came that we were able to interact with and talk to. Usually it was actually the foreign ones who had learned English as a kind of a middle language. So then, the 3-hour process of resorting the Legos back into their bins. It took 3.5 hours, I think it was. We started at 6, and it didn't get done until about 9. I think everybody ended that day with a headache. And so that's how we ended Friday. Then we've got the weekend remaining. That Saturday then, we had just time, and so we took a boat tour for an hour and a half north on the Rhine to a city called St. Goar. And there is a fortress, a ruined fortress. It's huge. And so we toured that fortress that afternoon. Then that evening we drove back to the church and prepped everything, put all the chairs and tables back, and got ready for Sunday morning. Here's some more photos of the fortress there. This is then Saturday night, right before Sunday morning. I guess kind of one of our last opportunities to have fun with the family and play games before our last day, which was Sunday. Sunday, we repeated the ministries from the previous Sunday. We sang some new songs. Different individuals gave testimonies. Nate preached that Sunday. And then that evening, the boys had been dying to take us to this woodland fortress. And so to get into here, you literally go through a tiny hole in a bush. And there's this whole realm back there that the whole town's children just go and hide out in there. And the boys have been trying to, I can't remember what they called it. It was like stepping into Narnia. It was crazy. It was surrounded by hedge, and it was massive. And so we went there. We let the boys take us over there, played soccer one last time, played some games at the end of the night. And we wrapped up that Sunday evening by just kind of gathering around and encouraging the kids to reflect on the week, to write things down, to journal them, so that they could look back at that and refresh their thoughts before something like this, or so that they can remember more vividly, at least, the ways that they grew through the course of that week. Monday was our final day, our traveling home. We left the Frankfurt airport at 12:45. Well, we left it at 1 because we barely made our flight. Barely. You can ask the kids about that. And then it made it back to Des Moines at 6:30 p.m. Here. So, now you can hear from people that you really want to hear from. And so the teens are going to come up and they're going to share some thoughts and memories from the course of the week. I'm going to have them come up to the stage. That way you can see them all. Yep, just line up. All right, we'll start with Nate, since he stood on this end of the.
Hi, my name's Nate.
Yeah, if you want.
I would say probably the most fun I had on the Germany trip would have been when we went to the fortress. I felt like I was maybe like an elf in Lord of the Rings, just kind of running around through all the castle walls and such. So that was probably the most fun thing. What God showed me is how I can selfishly serve God at times. As we reminded the teens, like, ministry is about people, not just doing things. And how often and how tempting it is to, well, I can go and do this and take care of this so that I don't have to be with people. And so God made that evident and challenged me on that, just because you're busy doing something doesn't mean you're actually serving and ministering, but that you are there to minister to souls and help people and encourage them in that way.
Hi, I'm Hayden Davis. I'm going to be a senior this year at ACA. But yeah, one of the funnest things I thought I had fun with this week in Germany was just being able to get to know everybody on a deeper level, and being able to go out in the middle of a vineyard in Europe and play soccer was really a good experience. But God showed me that I really like to serve when it's easy and when it's something that I'm comfortable doing and something that I'm good at. But then when it gets uncomfortable and it's something that I don't enjoy as much, like trying to talk to someone in German and trying to get through that barrier, I don't enjoy it as much. And so I think he's trying to work in my heart to serve in those uncomfortable places. So yeah.
Okay, both of theirs were really short. Mine is definitely not going to be that short. But I'm Austin, and my favorite thing I think during the week was playing soccer in the vineyard as well, and teaching the banana song to all the kids. Hayden and I did that. I won't do that to you guys. I'll spare you guys of that. But I was really challenged to stay consistent in God's word throughout the week. I found it really hard to find time to spend alone with God. We were so busy with everything at the church and just going around sightseeing and stuff, and I found it difficult to find time with God. So that was one thing. And then God really showed me the greatness of service and how important it is to stay connected and serve in the local church. I was challenged to step in no matter the time or the place, and I was challenged to take this attitude home with me as well. And obviously the language barrier was a bit of a challenge, and not being able to communicate with the people. And my vocabulary tends to be a little bit more difficult for them to understand probably than most people. So I learned quite a few things on this trip though, and I realized that Sawyer and everyone that organized this trip did so that I would be equipped to serve back home, and it definitely equipped me in many ways. And it helped me to mature through the work in the ministry and increasing in my knowledge of ministry and what it really looks like to serve. I realized as well that ministry is more about the people rather than the actual physical labor. And I learned that despite the barriers, I have unity and fellowship with the church members because of our partnership in the gospel with them. And I would just like to thank you all for your prayers and support. I I know a lot of you were praying for us, and I just really wanted to thank you guys for that. And shout out to Miss Priscilla for the cards that you wrote to us. That was a big encouragement as well.
Hi, my name is Hudson. One thing I really enjoyed was just playing soccer at the local park in Oakenheim with the youth group. That was really fun. And one thing I learned was that God's work is way beyond Ankeny, Iowa. And it was good to see God working in the lives of the people at the church and in the church, and how much the church has grown.
I'm Laura, and I went as a youth sponsor, and I would have loved to play soccer, but since I am with child, I guess I probably shouldn't have. So I got to watch a lot and cheer them on. But one of my favorite things was going to the fortress. I think that we rode down the Rhine, which is really cool. My mom's a geography teacher, and I was like, she's going to be so jealous when I tell her all the geography places I went. But we rode down the Rhine. We went in the fortress, and Nate was like a kid in a candy shop. He was telling all the fake stories about what happened here. And it was really funny, and it was fun, and the kids enjoyed it too. So that was really fun. Some way that God grew me. I went along, and, you pray for God to grow you. And Sawyer gave a challenge. Sometimes we pray for God's growth, but we don't really like the way he chooses to do that. And part of it was God showed me a lot of sin within my heart. Emotional. Got emotions, apparently. But, wow. I wasn't expecting to do this. So part of it was, when I pride myself in being, patient, right? I'm patient, pretty easygoing. I'm trying to talk with my hand. I'm patient, pretty easygoing, but then whenever you see other people sin, I'm not, if it's not something that I struggle with, then I'm not as patient. I'm not as loving. So God really showed the sin within my heart that I am not as loving towards people whenever it's a sin that I don't like. I don't struggle with that. I'm not like that. So just loving people through sin. And it's not like there was great, crazy things happening, but within my heart, I had to stop a lot. I was like, okay, God, this is the way I'm supposed to grow this week. Whew, okay, I'm done.
Hi, I'm Karina. I'm one of the other youth leaders, and I just want to start by saying thank you for sending us. It was amazing. It was a wonderful experience, I think, for the kids and the youth leaders alike. One of my favorite parts was getting to know the Snells better and seeing their ministry and their faithfulness. And, I think sometimes, I know as a kid, I kind of had this idea of missions that was maybe over-glamorized, if that makes any sense, of they share the gospel and all these people just drop to their knees and get saved. And that's not really how it works, and it's a lot more just like ministry here in the States, but just in a different culture, and just being willing to be faithful day in and day out to build relationships with people, which was something that the Snells really focused on. And so it was a huge blessing and encouragement to see their faithfulness. And, their church is a little maybe smaller than ours and smaller than what we would be used to, but that was not a discouragement to them. They were just encouraged by the way that people were growing where they were at. By the way, in one of the pictures, I think in the one with all of our vests on, the guy all the way on the left, his name is Hubert, and he wanted me to say hello to all of you all. And so he says, hello from Hubert in the church in Ingelheim. And he said, here, just show them it's the bald guy in the pictures. And I told him, well, it's all right. Our pastor's bald too. And he goes, well, I like him already. So you have a friend, Pastor Sean. You have a friend that you've never met before in Germany. And that really, truly also was one of the greatest blessings of the trip, was getting to know their church family. And while there was a language barrier, a lot of them did know more English than they thought they did. And so we were able to communicate in English, and I tried to learn some German from them, and it was a huge blessing in that way to be able to connect with them and recognize the body of Christ that we have, not just here in Iowa or in America, but just around the world. It was really fun to watch the kids grow. I personally grew as well. God showed me ways that, there's a lot of times when I'm willing to listen to people or willing to love people when I feel like it. But, after day 4 or 5, I was tired too. And I didn't always want to listen to people or love them in the way that that's what God wanted me to do on that trip and help them to grow. And so God really grew me in that area of building genuine love in my heart, if that makes sense. Another great, sorry, I know this is long, but the last thing I would say is, I think the last thing I learned was, or was just reminded of, is how great the need is. In Ankeny and Des Moines, there's a lot of great churches, and we are blessed by that. But that was not how it was over there. It was not, a lot of the kids that came to the Lego event were not maybe had never been to church before, or had not heard about God, and so just the need that's there and being willing to serve wherever God would have me to go, or wherever God would have any of us to go. So Luke ended it by challenging the kids and the youth leaders with Mark 10 of whoever wants to follow me needs to be willing to lay down his life and take up his cross. And just what that looks like in the day-to-day and what that looks like in the big picture too. So yeah, it was a great trip. Thank you for sending us.
I'm Triana. One thing that I really enjoyed while being there was the night that the church had a cookout. We got the opportunity to play volleyball and soccer with some of the church members, and I thought that was really a fun way to get to know them. Then one area that God grew me was breaking out of my comfort zone, not only with the language barrier, but also like reaching out to people I didn't usually talk to in the youth group and getting to know them better.
Hello, my name is Madison. One of my favorite things was probably playing soccer in the vineyard, like they said. God used this trip in my life to grow my relationship with him while I'm out of my comfort zone and really rely on God as my source of strength through some really long days. He also taught me the importance of serving others and not just focusing on myself. He taught me the importance of godly friendships and unity in the youth group. So thank you guys for sending us.
Hi, I'm Ashlyn. My favorite thing on this trip was when we had the cookout. We were singing around not actually the fire, but we were singing around what we used to grow the food. And that was just really fun to hear all of them sing as well. And there were times when they would sing in their native tongue and we would sing in English, which was really cool. One thing God showed me while we were there is that I need to have more of an eccentric mindset and do stuff for the love and joy of the people around me and helping them, and not just for the reward or just because I was told to do it.
Hi, I'm Bella, and my favorite memory was a lot of things. I loved when we would randomly start singing songs with the group in worship. That was really fun. We would just start, Hayden would start playing guitar, and then we would just burst out into songs, which was really fun. And I enjoyed playing soccer with the group and being able to connect and have a good time with the kids during VBS despite the language barrier. God has taught me a lot of things, but I'll just share one that really stuck out. What God has shown me is that access serving is what we are supposed to do. I also have learned with each and every one of us is different, but that is how God unites us together as a group of people from the church to connect and serve to the Snells Church. During Nate's sermon, he talked about uniting as one in Ephesians 4, and that really stuck out to me. And even though there is a language barrier, God still uses us to unite to ultimately serve the Lord. And it was really amazing to see how the Lord worked during that time. And that really just encouraged me that despite the language barrier, we were still able to serve. And applying that to here, we don't have a language barrier. So I think with that, with what we learned, we should just take what we learned and apply that to our daily lives.
I'm Chloe, and one of my favorite memories is kind of interesting because I actually like cleaning and stuff, and after all the VBS days, Triana and me would work to set up the dinner and stuff, and we would also like clean up afterward, and I don't know, it was enjoyable for me. And one thing that God showed me, he kind of showed me twice, because when we had like the deep conversations with the youth group, that was really interesting, and I actually enjoyed it. And we did that in Germany, but also last year on the Wyoming trip. So I am trying to talk with the youth group more, but it's very difficult, but that's one thing that God showed me.
My name is Amelia. One of my favorite things was singing together. We sang with our church family, and then we also just sang together in the Snells living room, and that was a lot of fun. We also attempted to sing in German, and that was interesting, but it was fun. I really enjoyed getting to know their church family. It was really encouraging to know that even though we didn't speak the same language, we still share the same hope. God also taught me that the quality of my service is not dependent on my circumstances, so that even when I feel really tired or frustrated, I can still choose to serve with a joyful heart and a humble spirit.
Hello, I'm Jenna Morel, and there was just so many things that I loved about Germany. One being just the architecture, like even around like the neighborhoods and everything, like it just looked so different, and things were older, and it was just gorgeous. Also, like the food and everything, they have really good ice cream. But I also learned a lot and was encouraged on this trip. One thing that I didn't expect is to kind of just see like how small like my world felt like in comparison, like going from like Iowa where there's there's some cities, like some things feel like kind of big, but then you go over to Germany and you kind of just see like how much you've been missing, and that was really cool. And then also like particularly one thing that I learned was more about missions, and like it kind of just changed my view on how I see missions, because it can be very different depending on like where God has you and everything, but just like the importance of knowing like who you're supporting and like seeing how they got there from where they started, with God impacting their lives towards missions, and just seeing how God used their lives in that, and kind of just connecting with them was very encouraging to me. And another thing was just like, even if you're not called to missions, seeing like the sacrifice that they put in and how they're serving was very encouraging to me, because like I don't think I'm particularly called to missions, but just seeing how God led them to that, and it kind of showed me that like even if you're not called to missions, you're still called to serve in your life, and in the people that you surround yourself with. So that was really cool.
Hi, I'm Sydney. I really enjoyed everything about the trip. It was really fun. I enjoyed playing soccer. I enjoyed just exploring the country. The architecture's cool, like the food's cool, like everything is just very different. It was cool to see everything. God showed me a lot of my pride in like just with working with people, because it can be kind of hard, because like communicating can be hard, so it was hard to communicate in a way that was gracious towards other people, and also not trying to take control of everything in different projects. So that, and also listening to others, and I also was really convicted about my priorities in life. I feel like here in the US, sometimes we can view life as just like being cushioned, and we expect to have a life full of comfort and having no struggle or like no sacrifice, but that's not what it's really about. So going and seeing other believers in another country, it was just really encouraged me that this is what life is really about, which is living a life that's pleasing to God, and serving other people and sharing the gospel. So yeah, that's what I learned.
All right. Thank you, guys. You can go. Unless you want to stay up here. One of the ways that I grew, and I would challenge you with here as we kind of come to a close quickly, Karina will laugh at this. It's like one of those moments that all wives get, where they've been telling you something for years, and you finally come around to it. I told Karina probably for the last 6 years, however long we've known each other, she consistently asked me, do you think God would ever call you to missions? This is not me announcing that I am, by the way. she's like, are you open to it? And my answer was consistently, oh, of course, I'm open to it if God calls me, which I always followed with, but he won't, which is like a redundancy. And it's an unsubmissive attitude to have. That was my attitude over and over and over again. Like, I'm submitted if God would call me, but he won't because I'm not called and I don't desire to go across the ocean. And Karina, in her infinite wisdom, or close to it, asked me at the end of this trip, think God would ever have you go to a mission field? I'm like, I'm open to it if you'd call me, which is a very different attitude. And so he really worked on me. It helps to see the people. It helps to go and realize that there are souls there. They're not some abstract idea, but there are people who are there, who are saved and are growing, who need discipleship. There are people who are there who have never walked into a church because of how influential the church has been in their history. And that's one of the ways I was challenged. And I would challenge all of you as well. I don't think that my previous attitude toward missions or ministry in that capacity is abnormal. I think a lot of us have that attitude. Well, of course, if God called me to do it, and when we say that, we mean that he would speak out of the clouds and tell us to go, which we know he's not going to do. I think a lot of us have an attitude of, well, I'm submitted to God, but I think he's called me to stay here, raise my family, raise my grandkids, and live in a really nice home for the next 60 years until I pass and am buried with my last 7 generations of family members. And I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with that. But like Karina mentioned, a large percentage of you, whether being a missionary pastor or just moving somewhere else to help a church, would be a huge ministry and encouragement to a church that needs it. And I'm not even just talking international. That can be here. That can be here. I'm not telling you to leave community and go to a church that needs it, that's closer to your home or 20 minutes farther away. But that is a ministry that's absolutely needed. And I would hope that if I was to come up to you at the end of this and say, hey, you have been raised in a great church, you have amazing Bible knowledge, and if you are submitted enough to the Spirit, that you would allow him perhaps to change your desires in this way and walk in a qualified manner, you could and should go be in full-time ministry. I think a lot of us would laugh at that, or you think when I say that I'm talking about somebody else. And my encouragement to you, again, this is Luke said this when he came. Pastor Sean's been saying this. This is 2 Corinthians. This ministry, missions, ambassador mindset of being able to sacrifice. The Snells are 3,000 miles away from grandparents. And they're willing to take up their cross in that way and go and serve Christ to a people that does need it, and to a place that is desperate for Bible-teaching churches. And my admonition to you is there's a lot of people in this room right now who, again, submitted enough to the Spirit to let God change their desires in that way, and walking in a qualified manner could and should go. And we've seen that in our church. I'm not saying we haven't. We've sent a lot of people from here who have been reached here, and that's an admonition to you. But to continue to do that, continue to be submitted to him in that way. Just by way of some final thanks here, thank you so much for your prayer. It's hard to think this way, but that is the most important thing. That is more important than the financial. Thank you for your prayer for us, for the Snells as a family. Thank you for your prayer for the Fletchalls who are currently ministering there. Thank you for your continued prayer. Please don't stop praying for the teens of this church, or for the Snells, or for the Fletchalls. I think it's an amazing thing that when we get letters from Priscilla, and I haven't said who they're from or what they are, that the Snells are like, are those from Priscilla? You know Priscilla? Yeah, she sends letters to our kids every birthday. Continue to have that kind of ministry to them through prayer, through contact, they love it, and they appreciate it, and they covet it. Thank you for your financial support. A large portion of our budget this year was to the youth group trip. So your regular giving gives to that, but also for your extra giving, for giving more on top of that. Thank you for those. And I don't even know the extent of who or how much, but we are thankful for your financial support. Some key figures to reference and mention that I can't thank enough for the ways they helped this trip to happen would be Brenda Hendrickson. She has an odd love of finding tickets and sending people places that I have not been given. And so I'm super thankful to Brenda for helping us she got us like awesome tickets for a great price, and she did a lot of legwork there, saved me a lot of time and headache. So thank you to Brenda. Also to Sally McFarling and Priscilla. I view them as like a tag team now with dealing with the finances that come in with Priscilla, like every week coming up to me, I found some extra money. And that's basically exactly how she says it. I found some extra money in a different part of the budget. And so we're super thankful to her and to them and for tracking those expenses, for tracking the giving and dealing with that. It's just it's an added gigantic thing to deal with in terms of the financial side of things. And then finally, the Lounsboro has helped us to figure out and brainstorm where to go, who to go with, and get some of those initial stones rolling for us. And so a huge thank you to them. They've got an immense wealth of knowledge in that department. And so with that, I'm going to pray, just a prayer of gratitude and thanks to God for allowing us to go, for sovereignly piecing these things together, and then we'll be dismissed from here. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this trip that you provided us, and Lord, we pray that we would not forget your faithfulness to us in that. God, you are faithful in so many aspects, in all aspects of this. God, that you would send the Snells to Germany, that someday we might go and visit them as a youth group, that you might have this church gathered together, that these teens might be able to go as a group to Germany, that you would provide in the present financially, that you'd provide strength to walk in the Spirit while we were there, that you'd provide kids that came to their Lego week. And Lord, we can't express enough our gratitude to you, and I pray that we'd continue to do so because of that. God, thank you for the kind of those key figures for the parents, God, who we know, and I'm sure it was an exercise in trusting you to send their kids across an ocean and not be with them. Lord, we thank you for the faithfulness of this church and for the faithful members here and for the fact that they are faithful because you were first faithful and first loved them through Christ. God, we thank you again for all the gracious things that you've given us and that we can come back to a church that seeks to love and serve you, and that those kids can get plugged into ministry here as well. So in your son's name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you for coming. Hopefully that was a blessing to you. You're dismissed.